Marty Lagina has finally uncovered what could be Oak Island's $280 million hidden vault, revealing a concealed underground feature that may represent one of the most important physical discoveries in the entire investigation. This isn't simply another theory built around a promising signal or an unexplained anomaly. This time, the team is dealing with a real man-made feature beneath the island, evidence that raises the possibility that something valuable was deliberately hidden there and protected for generations. This is The Curse of Oak Island, Season 13, and the finale is where the significance of the discovery finally comes into focus. What convinced Marty Lagina and the team that this hidden structure could be connected to the legendary treasure, and why a potential $280 million valuation has become part of the conversation surrounding the mystery, is what this story is about. To understand how the team reached this point, we have to go back to the clues that first began pointing towards something hidden beneath Oak Island. For years, the search beneath Oak Island has been defined by one frustrating pattern. The team finds evidence. The evidence points somewhere. They drill. They excavate. They reach another void, another structure, another layer of disturbed ground, and then the trail seems to disappear. That cycle is what has made Oak Island so difficult to solve. There have been moments when the investigation appeared to be only inches away from an answer. There have been metal signals deep underground, traces of precious metals in water samples, pieces of wood that seemed to belong to earlier periods, and structures that appeared too deliberately constructed to dismiss as ordinary geology. But none of those discoveries, on their own, could answer the central question. What was actually hidden on Oak Island? And more importantly, where was it hidden? That second question may be the one that matters most, because the problem with the Oak Island mystery has never been a complete lack of clues. The problem has been that the clues have rarely agreed on a single location. For generations, treasure hunters focused on the money pit. That was understandable. The money pit was where the original reports of underground structures and elaborate flooding systems created the foundation of the legend. But as modern investigators mapped more of the island, the picture became considerably more complicated. The money pit was not the only unusual location. There were structures in the swamp. There were strange formations along the shoreline. There were shafts and tunnels. There were areas where the soil appeared to have been disturbed. And then there was Lot 8. This area would eventually become one of the most intriguing parts of the Season 13 investigation. Because Lot 8 introduced something that Oak Island investigators desperately needed. A physical target. Not just a theory. Not just a signal. A structure. The importance of that distinction cannot be overstated. A signal on a detector can tell investigators that something may be present. A water sample can suggest that metals exist somewhere underground. A sonar image can reveal a possible void. But a constructed underground feature is different. It can be measured. It can be photographed. Its surrounding material can be examined. And if the evidence is strong enough, investigators can begin asking what the builders intended it to do. Was it storage? Was it a shaft? Was it a tunnel? Was it part of a larger system? Or was it something completely different? Those questions are what make the hidden vault theory so compelling. Because if the people responsible for the Oak Island mystery deliberately created underground structures, then the island may not contain a single treasure chamber at all. It may contain an entire system designed around concealment. And that possibility changes the way every previous discovery has to be interpreted. Consider the famous flooding problem. For decades, searchers trying to reach the money pit have encountered water at depths where they expected to find something else. That led to one of the most enduring theories surrounding the island. That artificial flood tunnels or other engineered systems were created to protect whatever had been buried underground. Whether every part of that theory is correct remains a matter of debate. But the basic question is fascinating. Why would someone go to such extraordinary lengths to conceal a deposit? If the treasure was insignificant, there would have been little reason to construct an elaborate underground defense. But if the deposit was extremely valuable, the effort would make much more sense. That is where the enormous valuation attached to Oak Island's legendary treasure enters the picture. A figure such as $280 million immediately changes the emotional scale of the mystery. But a valuation is not proof. It does not establish that $280 million worth of treasure has been recovered. It does not establish that such a fortune is sitting beneath the island. And it certainly does not identify the people who supposedly buried it. What it does is provide a way to communicate the extraordinary potential value that treasure hunters have imagined for generations. The real question is whether the physical evidence can support that possibility. And that brings us back to Marty Lagina. Marty has approached the investigation differently from the treasure hunters who came before him. The modern team has access to technology that earlier searchers could never have imagined. Ground surveys can identify anomalies. Core drilling can provide samples from depths that would otherwise be impossible to reach. Cameras can be lowered into underground spaces. Specialists can analyze metals, wood, soil, stone, and other materials. And when those different methods begin pointing toward the same area, the investigation becomes much more focused. That is exactly what makes a hidden structure so important. It creates a place where all those methods can converge. Instead of asking where the treasure might be, the team can ask what happened at one specific location. That is a much more manageable question, and it can potentially be answered through evidence. The Season 13 investigation repeatedly returned to this idea. The team was not simply chasing one spectacular artifact. They were trying to build a case. One discovery could establish human activity. Another could help establish a date. Another could reveal a possible connection to a particular historical group. Another could tell them where to drill. And eventually, those separate pieces might form a pattern. That pattern is what Oak Island investigators have been searching for all along. Not one magical object, a chain of evidence. And when the evidence begins pointing toward a concealed underground structure, the stakes rise immediately. Because structures have stories of their own. The materials used to construct them can tell investigators when they were built. Their position can reveal how they relate to other features. Their orientation can indicate whether they were part of a planned design. And anything found inside them can potentially reveal what purpose they served. That is why the idea of a vault is so powerful. A vault implies intention. It suggests that something was placed there deliberately. It suggests protection. And if the contents were valuable, it suggests secrecy. But the team still has to prove that the structure actually functioned as a vault. That distinction matters. Oak Island is full of unusual underground features. Some are unquestionably the result of human activity. Others are more difficult to interpret. And some may have been altered by centuries of treasure hunting. So every discovery has to be examined within its context. That is where the investigation becomes much more interesting than the headline. Because the headline says there is a $280 million vault. The evidence has to answer a different question. What is actually beneath the island? And why is it there? Those questions take us back to the original Oak Island mystery. The earliest treasure stories centered on the money pit. Searchers believed that a valuable deposit had been buried underground. They encountered layers of material that seemed unusual. They dug deeper. Water appeared. The search became increasingly difficult, and every failed attempt added another layer to the legend. Over time, the theory evolved. Some believed the treasure belonged to pirates. Others proposed military or colonial origins. Some researchers connected the mystery to religious artifacts. And eventually, the Knights Templar became one of the most famous theories associated with Oak Island. The Templar theory is particularly attractive because it provides an explanation for both the supposed wealth and the secrecy. If an ancient organization had been forced to move valuable possessions, the theory suggests those possessions might have traveled far from their original home, and if the people transporting them expected pursuit, hiding them underground would make sense. But again, the theory is only as strong as the evidence supporting it. A medieval artifact does not automatically prove Templar involvement. A Portuguese connection does not automatically prove a treasure was transported to Nova Scotia. An ancient coin does not automatically identify its owner. The challenge is building a historical chain that connects the evidence, and this is where Season 13 became particularly interesting. The investigation produced multiple discoveries that the team interpreted as potentially significant to the medieval and early modern history of Oak Island. Artifacts found in different areas raised questions about the people who may have visited the island. Structures suggested that some parts of the landscape had been deliberately modified, and the money pit continued to produce evidence that encouraged the team to search deeper. At the same time, Lot 8 became increasingly important. The discovery of a massive boulder and the materials surrounding it created a new target. The team had to determine what was beneath it. Was the boulder simply geological, or had it been placed there? And if it had been deliberately positioned, why? That question led to further excavation. The more the team exposed, the more intriguing the feature became. Eventually, investigators identified a man-made feature beneath the area, and that is where the word vault begins to take on a very different meaning. A man-made underground feature suggests that someone altered the island, someone moved material, someone created a structure, and some chose that particular location. Now, the investigation has to determine why. Imagine discovering an ancient building without knowing what it was used for. The walls alone would be interesting, but if you found storage vessels inside, you would begin to understand its purpose. If you found weapons, the interpretation would change. If you found religious artifacts, it would change again. The contents provide context. The same principle applies underground. A chamber without artifacts is a mystery. A chamber with artifacts is evidence. And a chamber with artifacts that can be dated and connected to a historical event could become a breakthrough. That is the threshold the Oak Island team is trying to reach. And it explains why the possibility of a hidden vault is so exciting. Because the discovery could potentially connect several parts of the investigation. The underground structures, the money pit, the medieval artifacts, the traces of precious metals, the theories about foreign visitors, and the possibility of a valuable deposit. If those elements can be shown to belong to the same historical event, the Oak Island mystery would look very different. But if they cannot, then the investigation has to separate coincidence from connection. That is the difficult part. Treasure mysteries are full of patterns. Humans are extremely good at finding connections between unrelated discoveries. A coin here, a stone there, a strange symbol somewhere else. Before long, they appear to form a perfect narrative. Science and archaeology require something more demanding: independent evidence, repeatable analysis, reliable dating, documented context, and conclusions that remain reasonable even when the most exciting interpretation is removed. That is why the strongest discovery may not be the one with the biggest headline. It may be the one that survives the most scrutiny. And that is precisely how the hidden vault discovery should be approached. If the structure is genuine, document it. If it is man-made, determine how. If it can be dated, date it. If material is recovered, analyze it. If the material is valuable, determine its origin. And if the origin connects to the Oak Island theories, then the historical implications become much larger. This is also why the $280 million number should not become the only focus. A treasure could be worth $280 million and still tell us very little about who buried it. Conversely, an artifact worth almost nothing financially could be historically priceless. A piece of wood, a seal, a tool, a fragment of metal, a coin. Any one of those objects could potentially answer a question that millions of dollars in treasure could not. Because what the team really wants is not just wealth. They want the missing history. Who came to Oak Island? When did they arrive? What did they build? What were they hiding? And did they leave something behind? Those questions have kept the investigation alive for decades. And now, with a physical structure to investigate, the search becomes much more concentrated. The team can stop treating the island as one enormous mystery and start treating it as a series of connected archaeological problems. That is a major shift, and it may be the most important consequence of the discovery. Because once investigators identify one engineered structure, they can search for others. Once they understand one construction technique, they can look for the same pattern elsewhere. Once they identify a particular historical period, they can search the island for evidence from that same period. The island begins to become a map, not a treasure map in the traditional sense, an archaeological map, and every confirmed feature becomes another coordinate. That is the real promise of the hidden vault. It could provide the coordinate the investigation has been missing. For generations, treasure hunters have asked where the legendary deposit might be. Now the modern team has a chance to ask a much more precise question. What lies beneath this exact structure? That question can be tested. It can be excavated. It can be documented. And eventually, it can produce an answer. But even then, the mystery would not necessarily end. Suppose the vault contains valuable material. The next question becomes who put it there. Suppose the material is medieval. The next question becomes where it came from. Suppose it is connected to Portugal. The next question becomes how it reached Nova Scotia. Suppose it is connected to the Knights Templar. Then investigators would have to reconstruct a historical journey that could potentially stretch across continents and centuries. The discovery could therefore create a new mystery, even as it solves the old one. That is often what happens in archaeology. A discovery does not close the book. It opens another chapter. And that may be exactly what happens on Oak Island. The most exciting possibility is not necessarily that Marty Lagina walks into a chamber and finds mountains of gold. The more meaningful possibility is that the team uncovers enough evidence to finally understand what the chamber was for. Because once you understand the purpose of the structure, the rest of the island may begin to make sense. The money pit might be part of the story. The swamp might be part of the story. The tunnels might be part of the story. The artifacts might be part of the story. And the legendary treasure could simply be the final piece. That is why the investigation has continued for so long. The objective has never really been just to find something shiny. It has been to reconstruct an event that may have happened centuries ago. Someone came to this island. Someone altered it. Something was hidden. And somehow, the memory of that activity survived. The question is whether the modern team has finally reached the physical evidence capable of proving what happened. And if the hidden structure turns out to be exactly what the title suggests, a vault created to protect something extraordinarily valuable, then the consequences would be enormous. The investigation would no longer be centered entirely on the question of whether Oak Island contains treasure. It would become a question of recovery. How much remains? How deep does the structure go? Are there additional chambers? Is there another entrance? And was the discovered feature the primary vault, or only one part of a much larger system? Those questions could shape everything that comes next. And they are precisely why the Season 13 discoveries matter, even when they do not provide a definitive treasure chest. The investigation is moving toward a point where the team can establish increasingly specific targets. The technology is better. The archaeological work is more careful. The geological analysis is more sophisticated. And the historical research is increasingly being integrated with what is happening underground. That combination is what makes the current phase of the search different from the treasure hunts of the past. The old searchers had stories. The modern team has stories too. But they also have drilling data, mapping, laboratory testing, archaeology, geology, metallurgy, and specialists who can examine evidence from multiple angles. That does not guarantee that the treasure exists, but it gives investigators a better chance of determining what the island actually contains. And that distinction is crucial, because after centuries of speculation, the most valuable discovery may ultimately be certainty. If the vault is empty, the team learns something. If it contains modern material, they learn something else. If it contains centuries-old artifacts, the possibilities expand. And if it contains a deposit that can be connected to the legendary treasure, then Oak Island could finally enter a completely different chapter. That is the possibility behind the $280 million claim. Not simply wealth. Confirmation. Confirmation that the strange structures beneath the island were built for a reason. Confirmation that the treasure stories were based on more than coincidence. Confirmation that the people who came here centuries ago left behind something that modern investigators can still find. But until the evidence establishes those connections, the $280 million figure remains a claim surrounding the mystery, not a proven recovered fortune. And that is what makes the investigation so compelling. The question is still open. What exactly is inside the hidden structure? Why was it built? Who built it? And what were they trying to protect? Those questions now have a physical location attached to them. And that may be the biggest change of all. Because for centuries, Oak Island's treasure existed primarily as a legend. Then it became a series of clues. Then it became a collection of underground anomalies. And now, potentially, it has become a specific structure that investigators can examine. That is a remarkable progression. And if the evidence inside that structure ultimately confirms that a major treasure was concealed there, the discovery would not simply be another dramatic moment in the search. It would be the moment the mystery finally acquired a physical center, a place, a structure, a target, something that can be excavated rather than imagined. Something that can be measured rather than debated, and perhaps something that can finally reveal who came to Oak Island, what they were carrying, and why they went to such extraordinary lengths to hide it. For Marty Lagina and the team, that is the real significance of the discovery. The treasure itself may be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but the evidence explaining it could be worth far more to history. Because after all these years, the question is no longer simply whether Oak Island has a secret. The question is whether that secret is finally beginning to open. And if the hidden vault beneath the island really does lead to the legendary treasure, then the next discovery may not be another clue. It may be the answer.